Laura, did you? Perfect. Yeah, Laura's recording this for us so that we can share it with some individuals who we knew weren't going to be able to join us. But my name is Holly Dicken. I am a non-tenure line faculty member at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. And I have been affiliated with AMATIC, which is the American Mathematical Association of two-year colleges for quite some time. It's my favorite conference to attend. Even though I'm not at a two-year college, it's because I teach the first 2 years of mathematics at Ball State University. So I teach the same classes that I would have if I was teaching at a community college. So the sessions and all of that is like perfect for me. So within AMATIC, we have a project we've been working on. Some of us on the team are here on this call, but it's Project Gains. And Project Gains is sponsoring this event tonight or this afternoon, depending on, I guess, our time zone. And Project Gains, it stands for the Graduate, let me make sure I get it right, Graduate Student and Instructor Networking System. And our goal is to encourage and support individuals who are considering teaching at a community college or teaching the first 2 years of mathematics. And so we want to help diversify those applicants and support them in the process. And one thing we wanted to do was offer this workshop, and I knew just the person to ask because we know part of that application process is providing a teaching philosophy, and some people haven't had the opportunity to put that together. So let me go ahead and introduce. I have the privilege and honor of not just working with Dave, but introducing him today as well. Dave Concepcion is a professor of philosophy at Ball State University. He has received multiple, and that I should emphasize that, multiple awards and grants for classroom teaching, research about teaching, and service to the profession in teaching areas, including all 4 university level awards at Ball State, the American Philosophical Association's Prize for Excellence and Innovation in Philosophy Programs, the American Association of Philosophy Teachers Award of Merit, the Linson Research, and the Linson Research Prize. I feel like I may have skipped over a line. Maybe I got them all. Did I get it, Dave?
Whatever, just keep going. Get it over with.
No, this is awesome. I asked Dave to send this and I'm like, wow, I knew he was awesome, but I didn't know, like, just amazing. Okay. He's the past president of the American Association of Philosophy Teachers, the past chair of the American Philosophical Association Committee on Teaching, and the current editor-in-chief of the Journal Studies in Pedagogy. He's the co-designer of the teacher training model used nationally in the field of philosophy. And he uses team-based learning with writing-intensive courses, experiential learning, embodied pedagogy, specifications grading, and inclusive pedagogy. So if you weren't hooked before, we have the right person here, and I am so excited. Dave, just thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your expertise, and we are all ears.
Great. Thanks for having me. I love doing this stuff. Sometimes I describe myself as a faculty developer. My academic department doesn't exactly like to think about me that way. They want me to publish more papers, but that's what I care about. I learned I thought about how I came to care about teaching so much. And I had this distinct memory of being on third base in my concrete school playground, and the kid running to first base in a kickball game hit a little shot, and the pitcher picked it up and clobbered this kid in the head and like blew him up and knocked him over. And then they started to fight, and I'm standing on third base thinking, can I go home yet? Can I go home? Like nobody's guarding home. And the teachers came and broke up the fight. And my memory of that is that standing there on third base, I was like, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. The teachers help the kids. They don't let them fight. They want us to have a nice game. And I wanted to be a teacher from then on. Like anytime anybody asked me anything, 4th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade, I wanted to be a teacher. And I went to college with the intention of majoring in whatever I felt like majoring in, and then getting a teaching credential and or master's degree so that I could teach somewhere. And I unfortunately fell in love with philosophy. I didn't know about philosophy when I went to college, and I took a class and just found it fascinating. And I found a home there. I discovered that there was an academic discipline that asked the kinds of questions that were always running through my head. And I hope each of you have find like that's what math is for you. And then I thought, well, rats, now I have to go get a PhD because they don't teach philosophy in high school. And to teach philosophy, I have to have a PhD. So I went and got one, but I'm a teacher like 100% through and through. And this is what I love doing. So I was asked to talk about the teaching philosophy statement. And I don't have a lot to say about it because I've given a talk on this topic a few times, and I found that the most productive way to spend the time is answering people's questions. So I want to give you enough fodder to hopefully inspire some questions in your head. And please make note of them, and we'll spend as much time as we can on Q&A. So here's the little bit I've got. One of my mentors always said over and over again, if you want to be a great teacher, you need to be a disciplinary expert, a pedagogical expert, and love students. You got to have all three. A disciplinary expert, I don't know how your grad school professors are, but some of them are suckers. Disciplinary experts know a ton about their area, but they could be terrible teachers. You might have met teachers who are incredibly passionate and you connect with as a person, they're an inspiration, but their pedagogy isn't particularly effective. So you can be a good teacher, an inspiring teacher, but you can't get as much learning out of folks because you're using weaker pedagogies. So you need to be a pedagogical expert. And if you were even both of those things, if you didn't love your students, the passion to stay motivated and committed and to do excellent work all the time wouldn't be there. So I think you really need all three of those. And that's my entry point as a person reading teaching statements. I should say I've been on over 25 search committees. I've read probably 3,000 to 4,000 job applications. And I'm looking for those three things. Does this person have the disciplinary expertise? Is this person a pedagogical expert? And do they love students? With regard to the disciplinary expertise, that box is so easy to check, I don't pay attention to it much. Because if you're applying for a job, you've got the minimal qualifications in terms of disciplinary expertise. You've got the relevant degree and so on. As far as being a pedagogical expert, it's not that I want to bring in for an interview the person who has the greatest pedagogical expertise at the moment of application. It's the person who has the most promise to have the greatest amount of pedagogical expertise. So the degree to which you have such expertise, you should demonstrate that in your teaching statement. So you might say something like, I scaffold all of my assignments and give just-in-time feedback for the following. Or I found that team-based learning, mandatory team-based learning as study sessions increases students' performance on exams, right? You say something like that, it sounds like, hey, this person's been studying pedagogy. But how do you demonstrate promise for becoming an even greater and hopefully one of the best pedagogical experts? Well, that involves telling a story about yourself. When I first started teaching, or when I first started planning my first class, or maybe you haven't even got that experience yet, as I watch my teachers, I notice that some of them do this and some of them do that. Or I tried this it should have worked for these reasons. The literature said this pedagogical approach should have worked. I tried it with the population of students I have, and it didn't work particularly well. And so I thought about why it might not have worked. And I read some more about the successes and failures of this approach. And I discovered that the needs of my particular students would be better met if I came at it from this particular angle. And I'm working on developing the way to do that. So yeah, that tells me you're reading research about teaching. That tells me that you have the potential to become great. That your reading is targeting particular needs of your students. You've thought, I have students who have particular needs. They're in a particular context. I'm teaching particular courses. What works best with this population versus that population? And I'm going to go out and study in a targeted way the research on that. Or if I don't have time yet to study it, I'm asking expert teachers. I'm asking experienced teachers about how it works, and I'm testing it. And if it doesn't work, I'm not going to give up on it. I'm going to retry it, because if I had a good reason to try it, I shouldn't just throw it out. If it didn't work the first time, I should think, I didn't do it right. Let me try to do it another way. So those folks who are thinking, who are my students? What do they need? How can I figure out what they need? What's the best way to do it? Those are people who are demonstrating incredible student-centeredness. They're making their professional choices about teaching in light of their actual students, and they're using research to get the right methodology. So maybe you're not a great teacher yet. Maybe you don't know what to say about scaffolding. Maybe you have no idea why problem-based learning is effective for algebra. I don't know. But are you trying to figure it out? The people who will tell a story in their teaching statement about, I tried this because I studied this a little bit and thought it should have worked. It didn't work. And so now I'm tweaking it to do this. That tells me everything I need to know. This is a student-centered person. This is a person who wants greatness. And this is a person who's humble enough to notice when they make mistakes and improve. If you have those character traits, I'm like, that's who I want. Because that person, maybe they're not as good as somebody else in their first year, but in their 5th year, they're going to be better than that other person. And in their 10th year, they're going to be awesome. So you want to be a good teacher, be a disciplinary expert. You're getting the academic training for that. Be a pedagogical expert. Not necessarily a pedagogical expert, but someone with the potential. The potential is a combination of learner-centeredness and humility. Last one is love your students. If you're this far along that you showed up in this meeting, I think that means you have sufficient love of your students to be successful. But it would honestly be a success if you recognized, like, you know what? I don't like these people. I thought this was the career for me. And now that I've tried it a little bit, I don't like this. It's better to get out early than for you to suffer in a job you don't like. And it's better for the students to not have a teacher who has a sort of mediocre commitment. And I, as a presenter in this setting, I don't have a lot to tell you about that, but some honest introspection. I'll just tell you one other story. I teach a special class where I teach students the ins and outs of academic publishing. I teach philosophy students to do manuscript content evaluation. I teach English students how to become copy editors. And one of the English students went through the course, and at the end I asked for an evaluation, and he said, "Number one thing I've learned is I hate copy editing." And I was like, success, right? You're not going to apply for a job you're going to hate. So that's a tremendous success. So, honest introspection about your desire to interact with the human beings you're going to interact with, because you can have the technical expertise. You can want a job that pays what it pays and has the benefits it has and has the context that it has. But if you don't want to be with the people, ultimately it's not going to work, So those are my big points. Humility, learner-centeredness, demonstrate an incredible desire to become excellent. Certainly show whatever level of expertise you have now, but really show that desire, manifested desire for excellence. The rest I got is Q&A. We got a while here, so I hope you have questions. And if you could turn on your cameras, I'd love to see you, but I understand that some folks can't. And maybe Holly and Laura can help me monitor the chat.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And Dave, I can just add that love of the students. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't love all of my students all of the time.
Yes.
Right? But I have found in the last, 10 years at Ball State University, and I have experience elsewhere, but I've had really bad mornings and I come in, I just need an hour in the classroom and I'm better. And that says something right there. And so when COVID hit and I didn't get that hour in the classroom with my students, that was a really, really tough part for me. I didn't realize how much I needed my students in my bubble. I mean that it just solidified that this is my spot. But I definitely am still learning, right? So growing.
Yeah,
I'm humble on that sense for sure.
I in my various roles, I'm sometimes called in to do remediation work, like a department or a faculty member has had some problems. And so this is the wrong comment for this group, but I think it follows from what you said. If you're a great teacher, you're going to like your job more. Like if you just want to be ruthlessly pragmatic about it, right? Like I prefer to go big values, like you can change a family's trajectory if you can help a first generation college student succeed. That's really what matters. And that's why you want to be good, because you make a difference. But if you just want to be ruthless about it, like showing up in a room full of people who are happy to see you because they can tell that you care about them and you're helping them grow. Just do that. Do it for that reason. If you don't buy into big value reasons.
Yeah. And did you see the chat from Laura about the length? A suggested
length for teaching philosophies. Well, I want to defer a little bit to you all. I will say in philosophy, anything longer than 2 pages single space would be strange. And many are a page. I would say on average, they're a page and a quarter, page and a half of a ordinary font. But every discipline has its own norms. Does that sound right for your discipline?
I believe the one I put together over 20 years ago was maybe a page and a half.
Yeah.
While people are coming up with questions, do you feel that of those 3 areas to focus on like I understand the discipline expert, that's kind of going to be found in other places, right? In your Vita and that kind of stuff, right? But so is there just a balance, or should it just be a natural flow between these other 2, like to incorporate, or do you find that there's better teaching philosophies that spend more time talking about pedagogy and including a little bit about the love of students, or does it just depend on the person?
Well, again, I think there's some general principles here, and I can talk to how they show up in philosophy. Perhaps they show up in math differently. There's kind of a formula to these things. The first paragraph usually, and I'm not endorsing this formula, I am now describing what I usually see, and then let me tell you how I would tweak it. What you normally see is some sort of intro paragraph that makes use of some cliche to communicate in one sentence the person's approach. Like, I really think of myself as the guide on the side instead of the sage on the stage. And I've seen that phrase so many thousands of times, it makes me want to stab myself in the eye when I see it. If you've got something that's not cliche, that's a good metaphor for the role you think a teacher ought to play or the role you want to play. Use it. It's super illustrative. They'll say something like that. Then there will be something of a prose version summary of the items in the CV. So it says, some people will say, I'm currently qualified to teach the following courses. I could easily stretch to teach these. My preferred mode of teaching is the following. So, usually people say, I like to minimize PowerPoint presentations or whatever. So they'll describe, they'll either describe their past behavior if they have some teaching experience, or they'll describe their aspirations for what interpersonal interactions might look like in the classroom. Like, I like to have students work in groups. So they describe kind of things. And then it goes a variety of directions. The worst ones are the ones that start talking about, I'm stopping myself to be judicious here. They'll say something like, the classroom is very important to me because I can apply my research in the classroom, and my research is the following. And then they start talking about their research. Like, that's a red flag. Absolutely a red flag. Another thing that, because that says this is not a person who prioritizes the value of teaching sufficiently for me to want to hire them into a teaching intensive role. If I were somebody at a research intensive institution, I might want to see that. And oftentimes people craft their teaching philosophy statements. This is another good piece of advice. They craft a general one and they send it everywhere. But some of the jobs have different balances of teaching and research. You should always, what's that job? What do they expect to see in terms of the relative value of these things? So that's a red flag. Another thing that will often be in there is, I always tell my students ... So somebody will say something like, I'm a stickler about attendance. I always tell my students, if you're not here, you can't learn. And another thing I tell my students is blah, blah, blah. And I also always tell them. And, the reason that's a red flag to me is, I think, what are you asking students to tell you? What are you designing for students to do so that they will internalize the thing you're telling them right now without you having to tell them? These are interesting things. So a whole lot of I always tell students is a red flag, because that tells me this person's mode of operation in the classroom is them pushing information rather than having interactions, or rather than designing experiences for students to learn from doing. But those are the norms. There's some highfalutin thing in the beginning, which is typically a cliche and frustrating. Then there's a list of what you're qualified to do, which I could get from your CV. And then there's something else about, right? People are trying to communicate why they value teaching, and they end up saying, I tell my students all the time, and here's what I get out of teaching. So yeah, and so the flip side of that is, like, talk about an experience where you were thinking about how to design learning events for students, and talk to me about how they went. Right? Don't tell me what you told students. Tell me what you asked students to do, and then what happened. That tells me that you're a student-centered teacher, that you tell students stuff all the time. Doesn't tell me anything. Well, it does tell me something. It tells me you're a teacher-centered teacher. Please give an example of being a disciplinary expert. Okay, my examples are philosophy. I'm sorry to say. I'll try to make something up about math, but then it'll just be embarrassing and you will laugh at me. But oftentimes in teaching statements, when people are talking about the courses that they're prepared to teach, say like, well, my expertise is in the works of René Descartes. And so I'm well qualified to teach a course in early modern philosophy. And I also have the reach to teach late modern and many other figures within the early modern period. For example, I'm also an expert in Leibniz, and let me tell you some stuff I know about Leibniz. And then they start talking about Leibniz. It's like, I don't care about Leibniz in your teaching statement. So that's a flawed way of demonstrating disciplinary expertise in a teaching statement. In other parts of your materials, you want to demonstrate your discipline expertise, and that is listing your coursework. Your transcript shows disciplinary expertise. If you have ever given any presentations about your area of expertise, like, I don't know what area, like, oh, here's one I know. Infinity is a thing you study in math, right? Like, did you take a grad seminar in Infinity, so that although you know you're being hired predominantly to teach core curriculum courses, if you are being hired into a place that maybe has a minor, and that transfers directly into a 4-year college, and so you've got a couple intermediate level classes that might be taught in that institution, and if that is how that community college works, you certainly want to see that. Say, I'm prepared to teach a course on Infinity, a mid-level course that could transfer into something like that. So it's your grades, it's your papers, it's your transcript, it's your degree is most easy. Yeah. Yes,
So
indeed, Descartes and Leibniz are math people. Yeah.
So Dave, would you say then the disciplinary expert piece doesn't really fit into the teaching philosophy, right? We need to be focusing more on the pedagogy and the love of our students, or love of the future students, in that portion of the application.
Yes, with one caveat. You do want to communicate somewhere, and potentially you could communicate this in the teaching statement as well, in maybe one paragraph, what you're well prepared to teach and what you could teach if asked to stretch. And the mistake you might make is to say you can stretch anywhere, right? Like, my training is in ethics. My training overlaps with epistemology to some degree. I got a B in graduate logic. You don't ever want me teaching logic. But I could talk about a stretch to an epistemology class or something like that, right? But my core is going to be ethics. Within ethics, I have certain areas of sub-expertise. So you're somewhere in your CV, you list your coursework, or if it's just on your transcript, and you list your areas of expertise and your areas of competence, is how we call it in philosophy. And you're prepared to teach certain courses, and courses you could stretch to should more or less match that. So you're not, if you say I can teach anything, just give me the textbook, and 6 weeks ahead before the class starts, you're not connecting disciplinary expertise to your teaching potential in the right way. But yeah, otherwise, the teaching statement is not a place for demonstrating disciplinary expertise. That's other parts of your file. Yeah, Laura, you couldn't do statistics. Yeah.
No, I couldn't, because I have never had statistics. So,
right.
So a question about, and this just popped into my mind. Like, who might you, so you write what you think is your best effort at a teaching philosophy. Before you submit it with your application, what should you do?
I don't know if the schools you're in have placement officers. Many graduate programs have a placement officer, a faculty member whose job it is to help you with that stuff. That would be the number one to go to. Number two would be maybe your current department chair, or because that person is committed to you at this moment, and so you're not asking them to do anything outside of their job profile to give it a look. But you want to run it by as many people in your field, and insofar as possible, those who have specific hiring experience in the kind of job you are trying to get hired into. Right. So I have some expertise in this stuff just because I've done it a ton, but I'm talking to you as a philosopher who's hiring into four-year college, right? And I don't hire into grad school, graduate professors. So whoever the relevant professors are that you can get to look at that, there's chairs of two-year colleges would probably be your number one people. My placement officer when I was in grad school was committed, although he didn't think of himself this way, but he's like, the only jobs worth having are R1 research jobs. You want a teaching load of 1-1, and you want graduate students to teach those for you, and you want to write books. And like all of his advice was targeted towards that, and it was so unhelpful to me because that wasn't the career I wanted. So you want to find the people who have experience hiring people who have the career you want. Samson, did you want to share your experience?
Yeah, sure. I wish to. Let me turn on my video. Well, when I first started teaching, a senior colleague called me into his office and said, look, Samson, I know you are very young into this profession, and I've been doing this for over 20 years. And there is something that I do that I want to share it with you. I know you are really going to go far in this profession, so I want to share this with you. One thing that he told me is that he doesn't have any complex teaching philosophy. All that he has is love your students as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that is all that he has. And I realized that every student, most of the students wanted to take his course.
Uh-huh.
And every student wanted to do well in his course, just for him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he told me, that you should love your student. If the student know that you love them and you are really interested in them, you want them to succeed, they will do everything to do well in your class, in your course. So I also pick it up. I saw it very important. So I picked it up and I started loving my student, and the effect was really very good.
Right. And all you had to do was start expressing what was in your heart.
Yeah.
Right. But you hadn't been doing it before.
Yes. That was when I even started teaching. So I was very lucky to meet him at my initial stage of my profession.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And also the support in his comment of like, you're going to be doing this for a long time and you're going to be great. Here's something you need to know now. But did you notice there was a compliment at the beginning of that piece of advice? So that's really cool.
Well, because what he said was that how I'm starting is just like the way he also started. How I came into the profession, we have some kind of similarities, some commonalities.
Yeah.
So he just wanted to just give me this advice as I move on. And it really helped me, seriously. I didn't have to struggle in class, controlling students. I was teaching in high school. I didn't have to struggle controlling students because they knew right from the beginning that I was really interested in what they are doing. And I really wish them to succeed in this course.
Yeah, so I've got a few things to say about that. First of all, you're awesome. Keep that up. But the number one thing that students say they want from their teachers is that their teachers care about them.
Oh.
And so showing that you care, a lot of times it's very easy for us to walk around and go, well, of course I care. Like, how would you think I wouldn't? But honestly, there are things we do that show that care more easily than others. But that's the number one thing students say. And isn't that interesting how that is not the number one thing on evaluations of teachers?
Oh.
That disconnect between what professionals think are the most important components of teaching and what students say are the most important components of teaching is a problematic disconnect. But there is one spot where I want to sort of, I don't want to push against your mentor, but I want to insert a different idea. My thing about being a pedagogical expert, if you love your students, like, and you demonstrate your care about them in general as people and about their success in the course, you're gonna get a following.
Yep.
And students are gonna want to take it. But I have seen teachers who are less demonstrative and don't quite get the same kind of human passion among their students about, like, you're my favorite teacher. Because sometimes students can be very attracted to things that are technically entertainment and not actually great learning moments. So I've seen these people who are not as passionate, not as good entertainers, but they're using pedagogies that are so much more effective than what most people are using, that they're getting more learning for their students than the super passionate folks. And so being enthusiastic, engaged, demonstrating passion are not quite the same thing as being deeply, deeply committed to concern for your students in general and concern for their success. So this helps me sharpen what I'm saying. The love of students is an incredible passion for their success. And you can show that in many ways. In some ways, it's just general enthusiasm. It's being entertaining. I try to be entertaining when I teach, not because I think students should be entertained, but because if you are entertained, you'll pay attention longer and then you'll learn more. But it's the learning that I'm after, not the entertainment. So I just want to soften a little bit what you said, because I actually do agree with you completely. Number one step is get that passion out there. If you can't get people hooked a little bit, everything else you do isn't going to work. But then once you've got them hooked, you've got to have excellent pedagogy, because you can have students committed to spending all kinds of time working on what you ask them to do, and you give them inefficient things to do, and they study for 2 hours and they learn almost nothing. Or you could have them study for 15 minutes and learn a ton. Like, do you have the right pedagogies? So it's like I don't want to say that having your students love you is more important than pedagogical expertise. That's why I kind of introduced them as two equally important things. But I do want to take from you that the passion needs to come first. If you don't have humans believing that you care about them and wanting to come along for the educative ride that you're going to provide them, good pedagogy goes nowhere, right? You've got this great pedagogy and nobody cares because they don't have any human inspiration. So I don't want to say that human inspiration stuff is more important, but I do want to agree that it's first. It's absolutely first. And that was great advice that your mentor gave you. Absolutely great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Samson. Absolutely. Ann Ho has a question also in the chat, Dave, that says, related to an earlier question, I've worked in math departments where faculty really need to be able to teach almost anything, the 100 and 200 levels. Is there a way to demonstrate disciplinary expertise while showing you are flexible enough to teach a wide range of courses?
Yeah, so again, I think most of the disciplinary expertise is going to be demonstrated somewhere else in your file. The problem that people have in teaching statements is that they overreach. And you are rightly noting that, wait a minute, what if the job I'm applying for needs me to show I can reach? What I think I would love to see in that setting is some discussion of a time where you were asked to teach something that you weren't previously comfortable with, I guess is the way I want to say it. Maybe you hadn't taught that specific thing before. Maybe you knew something about that unit or that topic, and you had to figure out, like, what's the right fit between given this content, there's some pedagogies that are better than others, right? Like some learning is more rote, right? You just need to memorize formulas, right? And the best path to memorization is repetition. Other times when you're working on applying something, that the skill you're trying to help students learn is accurate application, well, then you need to come up with a creative way for them to try something new, right? They already know the formula, or they've applied the formula in one setting, but they haven't figured out how to transfer the application to another setting. I mean, how often have you as math teachers seen that, right? Where they can do the problem if it's got the same kind of contextual clues in it, but if you give them different contextual clues, they don't even know that the thing you're asking them to do that they know how to do is the thing you want them to do, right? And so you think, okay, they need to work on transferring, like identifying when to use a thing somewhere. And so you didn't quite know how to do that. So you tried this and it worked or didn't work to a certain degree. So what that then would demonstrate is, like, I've been in situations before where I've been asked to teach new things. And let me illustrate to you my thought process for figuring out what the right pedagogies are given certain kinds of content. And then, so if I read something like that, I'd say, okay, yeah, this person, I'm going to throw them in some class they've never taught before, and they've got the right kind of attitude and the right kind of initial skill set to sort their way through that very difficult employment challenge. You know, I'll tell you, early in my career, when I was finishing up my dissertation, I got an adjunct job teaching philosophy of religion. And I had never taught philosophy of religion. I had never taken a course, undergrad or graduate, in philosophy of religion. And this school hired me to teach it. And I thought, oh no, I don't even know anybody who teaches philosophy of religion. So I went to a big academic library, and I went to the philosophy of religion section. And there were 2 shelves, 5 shelves high, of philosophy of religion books. And like 2 of them were intro to philosophy of religion. And I took a whole bunch of them down off the shelf and opened all their table of contents on the floor and saw, of these topics, what topics are covered in almost all of these books? That's what I'll teach. And I found the book that had all of the overlap and nothing but the overlap. And I read it before the students did. And then I decided what was interesting in that, because I knew my enthusiasm was going to matter. And so I taught part of that. So I found my way to the appropriate content in a subdiscipline I knew nothing about. I personalized it to me, and then started thinking about the pedagogy. You know, they don't need me to lecture. I know that. People come to classes with religious experience, whatever their religion or whatever their non-religion. They've bumped into religion in their lives. So they already have a store of information to connect to this stuff. Anyway, so just a couple suggestions there. But what you want to do is show your ability to get over that hurdle.
Well, we probably have time for a couple more questions if anyone either wants to unmute or put their question in the chat. Dave, I thought of something I thought of earlier, and I wanted to give other people an opportunity to throw stuff out there. But how often do you pull things, since you've been on multiple hiring committees, from the teaching philosophy, like into that interview? Because I would think that some of these stories maybe potentially people would share in here would be a great question, and they're already passionate about it. What an awesome interview I feel like it would build into. Is that common?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question, because this is a valuable piece of advice, I think. One thing that job applicants either don't realize or don't think about enough is that you determine what questions you're going to get asked in the interview. Interviewers, if they're abiding equal opportunity rules and so on, are not going to ask you anything outside of the bounds of the job application and the materials you've given them. Now, they may ask you about something they expected to see that's missing. So they might say, oh, I thought, you know, you would have some experience with this and it doesn't look like you do. I wanted to give you an opportunity to say something about that. So they may ask questions there. But a lot of the questions you'll get are, oh, I noticed in your materials X, Y, and Z. Could you please elaborate more on X, Y, and Z? Or in our context, this is important. I noticed in your materials this, which seems like it might be connected to this thing that's important. So talk about that. So what you put in your materials limits the range of what people are going to ask you about. The more interesting and unusual the things you put in there are, or the ways in which you highlight things, the more that's what they're going to ask you about. So they're going to ask you, if you tell them a really interesting story, and you can't break confidentiality of any student you've taught so far or anything like that, but you tell some story in your teaching statement that's got a real human edge to it. Like I once had a blind student who couldn't work with sets because the material was so visual that I was presenting with the sets. And I worked with the student to figure out ways to represent this stuff in a different manner, because I'm committed to equity in education, something like that. So you're trying to highlight a skill you have. In this case, it's about ability. And I can't make any guarantees, but 99% of the time that story is coming up in your interview. Right. So that vibrancy, your interviews, absolutely. When I read teaching statements, what I'm not going to do is look at it and go, oh, I see that you tell your students attendance is important. Could you say more about that? Like, never am I doing that. But if you had some story about how you confronted a learning challenge that a student was having, and you thought as a pedagogue about different things that could be done to help that student overcome that difficulty, I 100% want to ask more about that. Oftentimes in these settings, people have very short and direct questions that they're not sure they could ask. Like Laura's question, how long are they? Do you have other questions like that? Maybe we went too highbrow too fast. Like, let's get the nuts and bolts things covered too.
I just thought of one, Dave. I wrote teaching philosophy back in 1990, I want to say 9 or something, 2000. How often would you suggest, I mean, I'm not looking for a new job, but as an exercise, even for some of the people on here who might already be faculty, revisiting and thinking about your philosophy?
Yeah, I was thinking of this session in terms of getting a job, but there are other roles that teaching statements play. I'm a big advocate of being a self-reflective teacher your entire life. And honestly, your values change. I taught my first class in 1989. And I'll tell you, at that point, I was a grad student. And my number one value was, don't let this take much of my time or I'll never get my PhD. And now I'm a full professor and I'm like, what? I don't have any career aspirations I need to look forward to. Like, I'm going to sacrifice all kinds of things for students now. And I say that because you need to realize it's okay, right? That these things are different. And as we see, our students are different. A lot more students than 30 years ago. 30 years ago, a bunch of students who wouldn't have gone to college are coming to college now, and they're starting out at two-year colleges. And as I said before, you can change a family's trajectory one student at a time. Generational change, one student at a time. I mean, what an opportunity. What a scary responsibility as well, but what an opportunity. But so if it's worth it to reflect on the relative balance of your values and understanding of what kind of career you want to have. It's also valuable to think about, to reflect on what you think your best pedagogies are now. I mean, that's a really interesting one, because what you want to put in there in your example of like, I tried this, it didn't work, and then I figured out to do this, and you put in something that's like brilliant, right? Well, what was brilliant for you 5 years ago might be old hat now, right? Like my brilliant, my first year teaching doesn't show up anywhere anymore, because I've tried to get better and better. And what was brilliant back then just isn't good enough anymore. And so that's really interesting too. So I think it's very valuable through your career to keep looking at that. I've been to, and now I lead like mid-career rejuvenation workshops for like 25-year faculty. And what gets you excited now, you know, maybe you have job security, you haven't paid off your house, but at least you know you're not going to lose it anymore, and your car's paid off. Like you have different, your kids in college, out of high school, right? You're ready for a different way of thinking. That's very helpful too.
I mentioned to Laura, I actually had another meeting at this exact same time that I'm going to try to pop into the last 5 minutes so that I can make a presence. And so Laura, do you mind wrapping up things? I wanted to give people a couple more minutes, but I know it's also, Dave, we don't want to take advantage of your time too, but there might be another question or two that come in if you have a few more minutes. But I just want to say, Dave, thank you. I took a full page of notes and highlights, and I'm not applying for a job, but this is an important thing, like you said, just to be reflective of, and I just really appreciate your time today.
Great, happy to do it. Have fun in your other meeting.
Thanks. I'll get in 5 minutes. It'll be okay.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah, we are super grateful for Dave to be here. Are there any last minute questions? Like he says, it can be simple things, logistical items. If not, I'll give you about a minute to think on that, and then we'll just thank Dave. All right, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. So let's go ahead and thank Dave so much for his time and insights. And I don't know, I might actually find that old teaching philosophy and look at it and going, oh, what was I
know it's not going to be good.
It's not going to be good.
I went back and sometimes when I go back that far, I'm like, well, that tells you we all can always grow. And it kind of makes me think, what am I going to think of what I'm doing now? You know,
exactly.
15 years from now, you know, like.
Yeah. All right. Well, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to wish you all the best of luck with your searches. I think what you're doing is really important. And I hope this has been useful.